This is Tamara from mooglyblog.com, and in this video, I'm going to be demonstrating how to crochet the Lavender Kisses Beanie, which is a free pattern you'll find on mooglyblog.com. Please go to the link in the description. There you will find both right and left-handed video tutorials, a link to the written pattern, and links to all the supplies you need. To make this pattern, you'll need about half a skein of Red Heart Unforgettable in your choice of color. Here I've happened to use Pearly. You'll also need US M and J hooks. That's 9mm and 6mm respectively. And then, of course, I recommend stitch markers, a yarn needle, and scissors, your standard crochet supplies. This pattern fits a 20 to 24-inch head circumference, which is most teens and adults. The brim is very stretchy. We start at the top and crochet our way down, so you can also adjust the height of the hat to fit your personal style, whether you like it a little slouchy or a little tighter and closer to the head. Let's go ahead and get started with the Lavender Kisses Beanie. Okay, so to begin the Lavender Kisses Beanie, we're going to start with the larger hook, the 9mm. I'm going to make a magic circle around my finger. I simply take the end of the yarn and go around my finger towards me twice. Then I insert my hook under both of those loops, and as you can see, this is a really big hook for this yarn. This yarn does go thick and thin at times. It's sort of a roving style, but just be prepared that you're going to want to hold on to your yarn. It's going to be a little bit of a looser stitch. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull that loop under the first one, and then yarn over and chain one. This locks my loop together, so I'm not going to count that chain one as part of the chain three that we'll do to start row one. So I'll chain three now. 1, 2, 3. There we are. Little twisty, but take your time with it. And then we're going to work 11 double crochets into the ring. So that first chain 3 will count as our first double crochet, and then we'll work 11 more for a total of 12. So I yarn over, go under both of those loops. I'm not going to take it off my finger just yet, but I want to make sure that I go under the loop around and that tail. Yarn over and finish my double crochet as normal. There we are. Now I'll go ahead and pull my finger out of there as the stitches are holding the ring open, and just, very convenient for me here. So now I can continue to work double crochets right into the ring. Just as I say, make sure you're going under that tail end as well to enclose it in each one of these stitches. So I'll see you when we've made 12 double crochets. Okay, now I've got 12 double crochets, including that first chain 3. Before I join them with a slip stitch or even tighten up my magic circle, put that hook down so it doesn't roll away here, what I want to do is make sure to use a stitch marker to mark the first and last stitch of this round. So I'm putting it right in the top of that chain 3 to mark the first stitch, and then another one in the last stitch. When you work in the round and join with a slip stitch, it's very easy to accidentally end up working in that slip stitch or counting it as a stitch, and this will prevent that and let us know exactly where the first and last stitch of every round is as we move that up with each round. So now, with that done, I can go ahead and tighten up that magic circle. We just take that tail end and give it a pull. That's why we need to make sure to work over it in each stitch or this won't work. I really like to stabilize when I pull with my other hand. And this yarn is breakable if you pull hard enough, so make sure you pull gently just until that circle is closed. Then at the end, when I go to weave in my ends, I will make sure to weave this end in different directions back and forth through that circle so that it won't come open again. I do have a separate tutorial on my YouTube channel about weaving in that end to secure the magic circle if you'd like to watch that as well. So now you can see I am ready to join my stitches together. So I'm just going to go ahead and insert my hook right in the top of that chain 3. Now this is a big hook, so I might have to move that stitch marker, but not this time. So we'll go ahead. Oops, well, then it fell out. So let's try that again. There we go. Now we've got our slip stitch and we are ready to begin round 2. But you can see how those stitch markers, by marking the last and first stitch of the round, we know that that isn't a stitch that we'll be working back into. So for round 2, we're going to start again with a chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And of course, that chain 3 will count as our first double crochet. So I'm going to go ahead and take my stitch marker that's in that first stitch right there and move it up to the top of this chain 3. There we are. Then I'll reinsert my hook, and now I'm going to work another double crochet right into that first stitch. So since that chain 3 counts as our first stitch, that's essentially 2 double crochets in the first stitch. Then, to continue around for round 2, we're going to work 2 double crochets in each stitch around. So at this point, it's a pretty standard flat circle worked in double crochets. And if you wanted to, you could absolutely add a pom-pom to the top of your hat. We haven't gotten into any fancy stitches yet, so this is a great opportunity. It's a great hat to, oops, I picked up my tail there a little bit. It's a great hat to add a pom-pom to if you want to, but you certainly don't have to either. It looks great, I think, either way. So I'm just going to continue around here, putting 2 double crochets in each stitch for round 2, so that at the end of round 2, we'll have a total of 24 double crochets. So I'll see you when we're ready for round 3. So here I am at the end of round 2, ready to do my slip stitch join, but we've really got an opportunity here to see that thick and thin effect from this yarn. You can see right there, that loop looks a little thicker than that loop. That is the effect of this yarn. So like I say, just make sure to keep your loops sized for your hook and hold your hook gently as you're working with these larger hooks with a slightly thinner yarn. So to finish off round 2 here with our 24 stitches, I'm simply going to slip stitch to that first stitch. There we are. And now we're ready for round 3. We're going to start again with a chain 3 that will count as our first stitch. I always just like to take my hook off and drop my loop over my first finger like that. That way it doesn't accidentally pull back out, and it also doesn't get twisted, and I can insert my hook right back in there without twisting that last loop at all. There we go. So then to continue on with round 3, we're going to work 2 more double crochets right in that first stitch. So including that chain 3, that would be 3 double crochets total in that very first stitch. There we are. And then we are going to skip the next stitch and work 3 double crochets in the stitch after that. Then skip the next stitch. That's our repeat. So we skip that stitch, work 3 double crochets in the stitch after that. So there's 1, 2, and 3. You can see that skipped stitch right there in between. So then we skip the next stitch right there and work 3 double crochets in the stitch after that. Then we skip the next stitch. So that's how we continue all the way around for round 3. So at the end of round 3, you should have a total of 36 double crochets, with 3 double crochets worked in every other stitch. So you'll end up skipping the very last stitch of round 2. Okay, so here I am at the end of round 3. You can see right there would be our last stitch, so I'm going to skip over that. So I've gone ahead and moved my stitch marker up to the third one of that group of 3 I made in the penultimate stitch, the one before the last. So then I am going to, again, simply slip stitch here to my first stitch, and we've got a total of 36 double crochets here in round 3. So now we're ready to begin round 4. Round 4 begins with a chain 4, which interestingly does not count as a stitch. So this one's a little kooky and a little bit different, but let's go ahead and chain our 4. We've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then what we're going to do is skip the first 2 stitches. So we've got that marked stitch we're going to skip and the stitch after that. And then we're going to treble crochet in the next stitch. So if we look at what we did in the previous round, we had those groups of 3. That means we're going to go ahead and treble crochet in the third one, the last one of those double crochets we made in that group of 3. So I have made my first treble there. And then we are going to chain 2, 1, 2, and then working in front of the treble just made, we're going to treble crochet in the first skipped stitch. So before I continue on, what I want to do now is go ahead and move that stitch marker for our first stitch into the top of that treble. Remember that chain 4 there is not going to count as a stitch, but that treble is. So we're going to mark the top of that treble crochet. So we've got our treble, our chain 2. Now I'm going to yarn over twice for another treble, go in front of the treble just made, and we're going to go right into that first skipped stitch. So that's the one we joined to, the first double crochet of that set of 3. So to do that, we just go right into the top of that stitch, and we just make sure that all those other stitches, that stitch we've made before, that other treble, that it's behind, that it's not included in this stitch at all. So we can pull up our loop, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2 to finish off our treble crochet. So there we have our first crossed trebles right there. We've marked that first treble we made, that chain 4, we're ignoring it. It's a little ladder, it's not part of our design. So then what we're going to do is we are going to begin our repeat. So what we're going to do for every set of 3 stitches here all the way around. So we come over to this next group of 3. And what we're going to do, we're going to skip those 2 stitches and treble crochet in the third one. So we yarn over twice again, find that third one, go right in the top and make our treble, work off those loops in pairs, chain 2 again, 1, 2, yarn over twice for another treble, go in front of the one just made, and go back into that very first double crochet of the group of 3, the first one you skipped. And again, we want to make sure we could just go under the top of that stitch there, under both of those loops, and let the rest of it, all those other trebles and things we've made, fall behind. Then we can pull up our loop and yarn over and pull through 2 here till we finish off that stitch. And now, let me pull that out a little straighter here. You can see we've made our second set of cross stitches there. So that's what we're going to continue in each of these sets of 3 across, or around rather. So let's do one more. I've got my 2 yarn overs here for a treble. I come to that next set of 3 stitches. I find the one furthest away, the third one. Put a treble right in there. Chain 2. 1, 2. Yarn over twice again. Come back down here, find that very first one of the group of 3. And go under just the top of that. Push all those other stitches to the back. Yarn over and pull up a loop. And yarn over and pull through 2 here till we finish off that stitch. And now we've got our third set. So that's where we're going to continue all the way around for round 4. So at the end of round 4, you should have a total of 24 treble crochets because we have 12 sets of 3. So I will see you at the end of round 4. Okay, so here I am at the end of round 4, and I just wanted to go over how the end of this round goes here. Because you'll see when we got to that last group of 3, I worked the first treble into that last marked stitch, chain 2, and then I had to come back for this crossed stitch right here. But that means when it's time to move up that stitch marker then, we don't want to move it into the stitch that was worked into this stitch because we had our cross stitch. We want to make sure that it does go in the last stitch that we actually make as part of round 4 there. Then, of course, it is time to slip stitch. And this is why I had you stitch mark the top of that treble. We're not going to slip stitch to that chain 4. We're going to go ahead and slip stitch right to that treble. Again, that chain 4 that we made at the beginning of this round, it's just some chain 4s. We don't count them as a stitch. They're just hanging out there as our little ladder. So with that, we're ready to begin round 5. So, okay, before we begin round 5, this is what it should look like laid out a little bit here with all our little crossed stitches. And with round 5, we're going to be slip stitching right into that chain 2 space. So let's go ahead and get this stitch marker out of our way for now. What we want to do is just insert our hook right in that chain 2 space there, yarn over, and pull right on through for a slip stitch. So now we have a new starting location for round 5. We're going to start with a chain of 3, 1, 2, 3, and this will count as our first double crochet. So I'm going to put my stitch marker right in the top of that chain 3. There we are. And then to continue for round 5, we'll work 4 double crochets in that same chain space. So we simply go right into that chain 2 space. You don't have to work into those chains individually or anything like that. We're just going right into that space. Nice and easy and quick. So including that chain 3, that makes a total of 5 double crochets worked in that first chain 2 space. So to continue around for round 5, we're going to skip those trebles and we're just going to work 5 double crochets into each chain 2 space. So that means you skip those over, just jump right on over to that next chain 2 space and put 5 double crochets right in there. So with 5 double crochets in each of our chain 2 spaces, we'll have a total of 60 double crochets. Okay, so here we are at the end of round 5, and you can see I have 5 double crochets worked into each of those chain 2 spaces for those crossed stitches. But that means we're going to need to go ahead and move that stitch marker up from that last treble that we made in that round to the last double crochet here for this round. There we are. So then we can get our hook back in there and make our slip stitch in the very first stitch. Alrighty, so then, and of course that was the top of our chain 3. So then we are ready for round 6. For round 6, we are no longer increasing. We're going to be making stitches that are going to start pulling down the sides of our hat. We've got our nice big circle here, but it's time to start making our sides. Round 6 is also a round that will get repeated several times through this pattern. So for round 6, we're going to start with a chain 4. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we are going to, and again, we're not going to count this as a stitch here or throughout. That chain 4 for these cross stitch rows, it's just an entity that hangs out there in the back. So then we are going to skip the first 2 stitches and treble crochet in the stitch after that. Now these are groups of 5 we're working into, so this row is going to be a little different than we were doing our cross stitches before. So you're going to need to count out your stitches a little bit more. So again, we skip the first 2 and treble crochet in this one. There we are. Then we chain 1 and treble crochet in the first skipped stitch. So this will be the one with our stitch marker. Let me move that up a little bit here. There we are. So we're going to, just as before, work in front of the first treble. Now we're going to go into that marked stitch. There we are, and make that treble crochet there, right in front of the other one. So now I need to go ahead and move that stitch marker on up here. So I'm going to move it up, again, not to that chain 4, but that very first treble crochet that we made. There we go. Then to continue around for round 6, we're going to start with the asterisk. If you're following along with the written pattern, this begins our repeat. We skip the next 2 stitches and treble crochet in the stitch after that. Probably sounds a little familiar, right? So we yarn over twice. You can see our last treble was worked into this stitch right here. So we skip the next 2 and treble crochet in the stitch after that. Then we simply chain 1, and then we're going to treble crochet in the first of this set of skipped stitches. So we need to go back and look. We skipped these 2 right here. So we need to go into that very first one we skipped. It'll be the one right after the first treble from the last set. So again, we want to make sure we go under just the top of that stitch, that we don't enclose anything else in it. We just want to go right in front of the other treble crochet there. They shouldn't be linked together except by that chain 1 in the middle there. So then we begin our repeat again. Skip the next 2 stitches, treble crochet in the stitch after that. Chain 1 and treble crochet in the first skipped stitch. So go back 2 and treble crochet right in that one. So that is how we continue on around here for round 6. You'll have a total of 40 treble crochets, which means 20 of these little X's worked all the way around. So I will see you at the end of round 6. So as you can see here at the end of round 6, it's still pretty flat and it doesn't really seem to be coming in yet for the sides. But I want you to trust the process. As we work the next few rounds, this really will start to pull in. So don't panic if it's not happening for you yet. If it seems really big, this will all pull down as we continue to make the hat. Now I haven't joined yet, but I wanted to show you that that first stitch of our last set of trebles there does end up again in that very last stitch of the previous round. But we want to make sure to put that stitch marker in the second treble that we make of that pair, because it's actually our last stitch. So then, of course, we can join with the slip stitch to that first marked stitch again. Make sure you ignore that initial chain 4, and then we're ready for round 7. And round 7 will also be one that we repeat a couple times in this pattern. To begin round 7, we're going to start with a slip stitch into that first chain 2 space. Then, of course, we can remove that stitch marker since that's no longer the first stitch here. What we're going to do for round 7 is we're going to chain 3, which will count as our first stitch of the round. So I'll go ahead and get my stitch marker right in the top there. And then we're going to work 2 double crochets in each chain 1 space, or excuse me, 2 double crochets in this first chain 1 space, and then 3 double crochets in each chain 1 space after that. So we've got our chain 3 that counts as our first double crochet, so we only need 2 more for this one. And just as before, now we're going into the chain space, not the individual chain, even though it's just a chain 1. So there we are. Now we've got 3 double crochets in our first chain 1 space. So we'll skip those next 2 trebles and work 3 double crochets in the next chain 2 space. So similar to what we were doing before when we were working 5 double crochets in the chain 2 space, now we're working 3 double crochets in the chain 1 space. I'm sorry if I said chain 2 space again. It's just a habit. Now we've got chain 1 spaces. Chain 1s in between those trebles. So each one of those chain 1 spaces gets 3 double crochets worked in it. So at the end of round 7, you should have a total of 60 double crochets. So here I am at the end of round 7. I've got 3 double crochets in each of those chain 1 spaces. You can see right there in our crossed stitches. And you can see too, it is starting to cup up into that more bowl or hat shape at this point. So I did move that stitch marker up from that last treble up into that last double crochet. So with that, I can go ahead and slip stitch to finish off round 7. So to continue with the pattern, rounds 8, 9, and 10 are repeats. For round 8, you make another these crossed trebles row, a repeat of round 6. So here we had round 6, round 7, round 8 is a repeat of round 6. But this time you'll be working into groups of 3, so you won't have to count quite as carefully. You can go back to just going to the last one and then the first one as you make that round for round 8. Round 9, just like the round we just made. And then round 10 is round 6 again. So at the end of round 6, you'll end with a round of these crossed stitches. Or I should say at the end of round 10, you'll have a repeat of round 6 with, again, 40 treble crochets. Then we're ready for round 11 where we switch hook sizes. So round 11 is another repeat of round 7, the round we just made, 3 double crochets in each chain 1 space, but the difference is we're going to make it with a smaller hook. This one is a USJ 6mm. This really helps finalize bringing in those sides and allows us to make a smaller, stretchier brim while leaving this beautiful lace that matches the Lavender Kisses cowl. So we're going to go ahead and pretend that this was round 11 and that I've worked it in this smaller hook. It's the exact same stitches, just made smaller. So let's go ahead and move on to round 12 of our brim. Rounds 12 through 14, we'll continue with our smaller hook and we'll be making the actual stretchy brim portion. So to begin round 12, we start with a chain 1, and then we're going to front post double crochet around the first stitch, and then back post double crochet around the stitch after that. And that will be our repeat. So we've got our chain 1 here. I'm going to yarn over. I'm going to go around right around that first stitch. It's our marked stitch from the front. Go around the back of the post. Bring the hook back up to the front of our fabric here. Yarn over. Pull that loop behind the post. Then yarn over and pull through 2. And yarn over and pull through 2 to finish the stitch. So that was the first stitch of this round. So I want to go ahead and move that stitch marker right on up to the top of that front post double crochet. Then I will back post double crochet around the stitch after that. So I'm going to yarn over and come from behind that stitch, put my hook around the front of the stitch and bring it back out to the back of the fabric. Yarn over, pull that loop up and around the post. Yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. That is our basic repeat, and that's going to start creating our crochet ribbing. So we yarn over and do a front post double crochet where we come from the front of the fabric around the back. Yarn over and pull that loop up and through. Finish our double crochet, followed by a back post double crochet. Yarn over, find the next stitch, come from behind, go around the front of the post. Yarn over, pull that loop up and through, and finish off our double crochet. So let's do one more set. Front post double crochet. We go from the front around the post. Yarn over and pull up that loop and finish it off like a double crochet. Back post double crochet. Yarn over and come from behind. Pull up that loop and finish it off. So just go back and forth, front post, back post, front post, back post, all the way around for another 60 stitches for round 12. Okay, so here I am at the end of round 12. And you can see I worked a back post double crochet around that final stitch there and moved that stitch marker up. So after that, we can simply join again with our slip stitch in the top of that first front post double crochet. And then rounds 13 and 14 are exactly the same as the round we just made. This time though, we're going to be working around post stitches. So to begin both of these rows, we'll start again with our chain 1. I'm going to go ahead and move this stitch marker in the first stitch here out of the way for now. And then simply work a front post stitch around the front post stitch in the previous round. So you want to go ahead and take your time and make sure getting right around that post there. That very first one can be just a little bit tricky sometimes. So I'm going to move that stitch marker on up. So basically rounds 13 and 14, we're working front post stitches around front post stitches and back post stitches around back post stitches. So again, you'll want to look for that post right there for that one. So you can come from behind around that one because it's our second one there. And then we're back to front post stitches. So when it's in front, work a front post stitch around it. When it's in back, work a back post stitch around it. This creates a very simple but stretchy ribbed brim that is great for this hat. And again, I meant to mention it earlier, but I don't think I did. There is a matching Lavender Kisses Cowl, which also has a YouTube video tutorial already up for it and a written pattern on mooglyblog.com. So as I'm saying, for rounds 13 and 14, simply continue crocheting around, matching up your front post and back post double crochets. And then we have the finished hat right here. You can see we've worked from the top down, and this was great big and loose up here at the top. But as we continued those repeats and then switched to our smaller hook for those last few rounds, it really brought it in for a really nice stretchy brim with a nice loose hat that won't ruin your hairstyle. And again, works beautifully with the Lavender Kisses Cowl. And that's how to crochet the Lavender Kisses Beanie. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll give this one skein crochet hat pattern a try. Be sure to visit that link in the description for right and left-handed video tutorials, as well as the written pattern itself. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.